In part one of this episode, Design Thinking and Organizational Culture, Holly gave us the background of how it starts with a people-first approach and creating an environment and culture that support curiosity, courage, and candor. In part two, we continue our journey with Holly as she describes what it means for leaders and how they should show up in order to help their people to thrive and reach their full potential.
I think overall, certainly when I went to business school, I didn't learn how to be a human-centered leader. And so if I dial back to the principles of design thinking, and especially I think this is showing up in our world as we navigate the pandemic, a new emergence of leadership style and leadership skills, I think, is required in order to guide us through this crazy time in our history. And skills like empathy, skills like humility, compassion, kindness, which generally I would say have been viewed as soft skills, right? And, leaders are supposed to be assertive and decisive and firm and committed and all these fierce words, right? That feels like they have a little bit of a punch in them. And I think there is this opportunity for us to emerge in a more thoughtful, human-centered kind of way. Boy, now is the time, right? One of the things that I was doing when I was running my team back at P&G and the other people that I still mentor today, I would end every conversation with the sentence, "How might I support you?" And a couple times people, they would end up tearing up, right? And you would say, "Wow, what's going on?" And they said, "Nobody's ever asked me that before." And you say, "Wow, what do you mean?" Right? And I felt as their mentor or as their coach or as their boss, how do you create those spaces where people can really do the very best that they can? And sometimes they need help, right? So, how can I support you? How might I support you? Those points really matter. And I think that small gesture of, hey, you matter. I want to make sure you get what you want out of this experience and support you every step of the way is so, so important. And so those small things that we do make a huge difference. Is that seen as soft? Perhaps. Was it meaningful to them and to me to feel like they know that I want them to be successful in that space? Yes. And, even now at the end of every kind of client call before we jump into an engagement, I ask them, is there anything you're worried about? And often people say, I don't know, nobody's ever asked me. Same kind of thing, right? Anything you're worried about, what else is going on? Because I want to make sure they have that time to share what's going on with them. Are they going to sleep the night before? Are they going to worry about something? What's happening? Even in a virtual environment, I think really modeling those thoughtful leadership behaviors are arguably more important than ever. And, as you think about working in this time, right, we've all been home for months. And how strange that continues to feel. I had a call with a client this morning that said that they're not likely to have anybody back in their office until January 2022. And I said, oh my God, 2022, holy cow. And they said, yeah, if we end up in the office together before then we'll be grateful and delighted. But kind of putting that out there for employees such that they know that that's kind of the reality of the moment. When I thought about that, I thought, wow, how do we bring leaders along in this journey? Because one size fits all isn't working, right? And we've been at home during a pandemic trying to work, not working at home, right? This is totally different than working at home was a year ago. And, now we're trying to do homeschool and manage our teams and, run our businesses, whatever, small, large, or in between. And we're not traveling and we're not having those face-to-face interactions, at least in the physical entity. Certainly everything is on video. And that works well, and it still feels so different, right? And so it reminds me of some work of two researchers, one from Carnegie Mellon here in the US named Anita Woolley, another from MIT out of Boston named Tom Malone, and they did some really interesting work on collective intelligence in groups. Some of their research focused on how does that translate in the virtual world. So their foundational principles were rooted in how do you get the best outcomes out of assembling teams in different kinds of ways. And their hypothesis was if you put a group of individual geniuses together on a team, you're going to get better outcomes. And their hypothesis was completely invalidated and wrong, right? So what they learned is if you put a group of people who have individually kind of average intelligence in a team, they actually get much higher and much more creative results. And you say, wow, why is that? And what does that mean for recruiting practices, right? And what they learned is the people who had the most to lose because of fear of judgment were actually the geniuses. So, if you were the highest ranking member, the valedictorian of your Ivy League class, maybe you were not feeling great about raising a wild and crazy idea, and people go, oh, well, they're not as smart as they thought they were, right? And this is back to the curiosity, right? And the courage to raise an idea and the candor in that environment and the culture. And if we can suspend those judgments, that's really important. And so in their research, the example was that the people with the average intelligence got better outcomes. And for 3 reasons is what they learned were the key drivers of that outcome. The first was social sensitivity. So the ability to kind of read the facial expressions of others, right? And you can do this, you can measure the work, which is kind of shocking, right? How do you measure social sensitivity? I call it kind of the raccoon mask, right? The mask used to be something other than what it is today down here, right? But the raccoon mask between the brow bone and the cheekbone. And so it's 36 images, but if you Google the reading of the mind and the eyes, and we'll post the link as well, reading of the mind and the eyes test, there's 36 images and you decide, hey, can you really read the emotional state of the other person only by seeing this much of their face, which kind of works well today, right? Given you can't see the rest. But they realized that people with the highest levels of social sensitivity actually did better, and they were able to get better outcomes because they could productively engage the group. The second point that really mattered in their research was equal turn taking in groups. So dialing into, hey, we heard from everyone? This is back to the diversity thing, right? If you're bringing this diverse group of people together, you really want to hear from them and not shut them down, or not have only 2 people in a meeting or a workshop do all the talking, which we've all been in those sessions, right? But it leaves you wondering, why did I hurry up and get into the call today? Why did I hurry up and get into the office today? Whatever reality we're living in, if you're not going to be able to meaningfully contribute. And the third point, which was a little surprising to the researchers, was that having more women in the group made a difference too. What they learned is, by definition in neuroscience, that women were more tuned into the first 2, the social sensitivity and the equal turn taking in groups. So some interesting things there, but what does that have to do with our team dynamics in a virtual world and kind of creating those climates and cultures? They said that kids as young as 6 months could tell the difference between a FaceTime call, something that was live and happening real time, and a YouTube video. And so we're wired as humans, right, to kind of detect those changes. And so it really does make the case for more and maybe more effective use of video calls. Now I'm getting a link for whether it's, a Zoom or a Teams or a WebEx or a Blue Jeans, all of those I think I've had in the past week. Some people still dial in. Somewhat refreshing when they dial in, because you feel like, okay, I can walk around my house and fill up my tea and not feel like I'm fixed in my chair. But on the other hand, you think, oh, I'd love to see them, right? Because you generally see the people that you live with and hardly anyone else at this point. So yeah, when you think about creating those climates, I think there's a lot we can learn from some really great research that's happened, and really trying to build more empathetic and human-centered cultures that allow not only the innovators to thrive, but also everyone else, right? When you think about new hires coming into an organization, wouldn't it be great to not be so concerned about your new role, right? So hypersensitive to maybe asking that difficult question or taking a little bit of risk and putting a wild and crazy idea out there. What if getting something wrong didn't mean there was something wrong with you, right? What if it was okay to say, wow, I know this is a really uncomfortable truth, but I think I need to share it because it'll serve us well later, right? I had a conversation with a client earlier this week on, wouldn't you rather hear from your own internal team what those potential pitfalls might be before you launch, because your competitor is going to come after those weaknesses as soon as you go to market, right? And they said, oh, I never thought about it that way. So yeah, this is part of the leadership exercise in creating those conditions and cultures where people can really do their best work. So much great research to do and to investigate in this space, because I don't think our organizations are really practicing a lot of what the cutting edge research says makes a difference. And the question I ask is, why not, right? How might we create those cultures and create those environments and conditions where people can do their best work and do so on a daily basis, right? It doesn't have to be a special time when you get sent to an offsite meeting, or you come together with a certain amount of energy and inspiration and something that's highly curated. I think it can happen every day. But the question I have is, wow, how do we do that, and how do we do that more effectively? So it's an exciting time to be in the space of human-centeredness, both in the innovation and also organizational side of things, because there's so much untapped leadership potential, I think, living in each of us, Jeff. As I think about kind of the conversation that we're having, one of the things I'd invite the audience to think about is, what's one thing maybe you can take away that I've shared today that you can start to apply in your own business, in your own team, in your own culture, to really change the conversation, change the way it feels to come to work every day, whether that's on your screen or actually in an office, right? To create those cultures that really do unleash the potential of everyone. And reminds me of a quote that's carved into the cornerstone of the Stanford Business School, kind of the pillar when you walk in. I got to go lecture there a few years ago, and one of the things that really struck me is that quote, and I think about it quite regularly, and it says, "Dedicated to the things that haven't happened yet and the people who are about to dream them up." I love that, right? I get chills every time I say it because it's so loaded with potential, and that's each of us. That's you, that's me, that's everyone that's watching and tuning in. And wow, what do we do with that? What's one thing that you can do differently with any of the things that we've talked about today? And really answering that call to dedicated to the things that haven't happened yet and the people who are about to dream them up. Let's go for it.
So inspirational, and you can tell your energy, enthusiasm really went through the roof on that.
Right, and that was a few years ago, and there's not a week that goes by that I am not saying that out loud and just kind of channeling that energy to kind of go after whatever the challenge ahead is. So yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like it.
I would just like to say, Holly, thank you so much for the time. It's been such a pleasure. I've learned so much in such a brief space of time, and I'm more excited and motivated to look into design thinking and how we can share that with the organizations that we work with. Before we go, just any parting words of advice?
Wow, I really think it's back to that invitation, Jeff, on if you can take one thing, and the way I think about the invitation, and often I'll close out my training programs with this same invitation sequence, and it goes, pick one thing that you can do differently each day. I think it's much like a fitness program or a fitness regimen, right? A trainer will tell you, once a week at the gym isn't going to make a difference, but if you can train your mind and your body to really dial into your goals and to be intentional about making those choices that are going to move the needle for you, one thing a day, I think one little behavior, one conversation, one interaction, one experience can make a huge difference in creating those kinds of cultures and climates that absolutely are important in our organizations today. And it's different, right? People have higher expectations now. I think they have a higher need for connection, a higher need for humanity, and a much lower tolerance for incompetence than maybe they did 6 months ago or a year ago, right? And that's up to each of us to really rise to that occasion and dial into our human-centered leadership potential.
Holly has really inspired us and reminded all of us at Engaging Leaders why we do the work we do with various organizations. We're looking forward to hearing what has inspired you after this 2-part episode. What is one thing you could do differently to help you become a leader who behaves more thoughtfully and emphatically?